In today's lecture, we will be focusing on one of the building block of modern capitalist economies, which is the firm or a factory or any business. Now, before we move forward to discuss a firm, let's try to understand some of the background. And we all understood by now the background of modern capitalist economies are division of labor or specialization. We are all trying to specialize in their own activities, and as a result we experience high productivity. Now question is this: how this division of labor, which is the backbone of modern capitalism, is coordinated? And it is coordinated in two major ways. One is through a firm, which is a business organization, and in a firm these are the key players. The key players are the owners of a firm, the managers and the workers, and they interplay, and all of them come together to make a product available. The second important player in this is the market. Now I'll define market in a bit, but first let's try to understand what does it involve. Who are the players? The key players in markets are the sellers, the firm, and the buyers, the consumers. Basically, in the market, the actual buying and selling of the goods produced by the firms happen. Now, to continue with our discussion of the firms, let's try to delve deeper into a firm. So firm is a business organization. It's very important. It's a business organization with the following characteristics. It employs people. It purchases inputs to produce goods and services like raw materials. And finally, it intends to earn profit. Profit is the motivating factor of modern firms under the capitalist economic system. So essentially what firms does, it buys inputs, which is raw materials, capital and labor, and sell finished goods and services in the market. And let's now try to define what is a market. So market is an institution that brings together buyers and sellers of goods and services who may be either individuals or businesses. So market can be anywhere where exchange of goods and services do take place. For example, we all know a grocery store is a market, or if you go to a market like a mall. There are also markets which operate in virtual world like Amazon, like eBay, or anytime you purchase anything online, those are virtual markets. So market can be anywhere where exchange of goods and services happen. So anything that firm produces are bought and sold in the market. And also in the market, firms do buy the raw materials, labor, and all other stuffs they need to produce the goods they are trying to produce. Now let's spend a little bit of time about the structure of a firm. Now, one of the important characteristics of the modern firm is that there is a separation of ownership from control. So owners in a firm are shareholders, but the people who actually control the firm are the managers like CEOs or managing directors or vice presidents or directors of a company. However, a firm can be owned by a completely different entity. So there's a separation of entity between the firm ownership and the control over the firm. Second, there are managers. Owners and managers have power over workers. That's very important because workers are the foot soldiers. They are the actual people who make things happen, but they are directed by the managers, and in turn managers are directed by the owners. And here's the most interesting part. There's something called contracts in modern firm. So what these contracts do, they specify a set of actions that the parties involved should undertake. For example, if you are working somewhere, what a firm will do, they will sign up a contract because that's the legal document that ensures what is expected from you as a worker. Now, so let's try to understand using a picture. So this basically shows the inside of a firm. So inside of a firm, we have the board of directors sitting at the top. So these are basically the owners of the firm. The owners of the firm hire the managers, and management starts with CEO. CEO is the head of the managers, and then is followed by vice presidents, managing directors, and all sorts of ranks. And finally, the most important player in this is the workers who actually produces goods and services. So role of a manager is to direct these workers in the production of goods and services where the capital or the money is provided by the owner or the board of directors at the top. One interesting thing in the firm is that hiring labor is a complicated process. The question is this: why hiring labor is a complicated process? Why not? It's difficult. Because hiring labor is different from buying other goods and services. Or to put it differently, labor is distinct from a broccoli. For example, if you go to a market and try to buy a broccoli, you buy or what you get to see. So if you look into a broccoli, if it looks fresh, that means you know it's good. But there's a problem hiring labor because there's an issue of asymmetric information. That means when you hire a labor, it's all based on expectations. A labor might or worker might have degrees to do a job, but you really don't know how capable that person is. You can look into that person's work experience, you can request recommendation letters, you can make them go through multiple tests, but still there is a lot of uncertainties. You really don't know what you are getting when you are employing a workers, and that's the problem of asymmetric information, because the owner or the managers do not know what kind of product they are getting when they are hiring a worker. Second is it's a wage labor. That means a system in which producers are paid for their time they work for their employers. There's no transfer of ownership of labor. That means when you pay a worker, all you are buying is a time from the worker. You don't own the worker like buying a broccoli. When you buy a broccoli, you own the broccoli. You can eat it, you can throw it in a garbage bin. It's up to you. Or you can sell it to somebody else. But when you buy labor or worker, you are not buying the person. You are just buying the person's time to do a very specific job. And that creates a lot of nuances in the production process, because workers are human beings. They are not robots. So they have their own mind, they have their own thinking, and they are essential for the production of goods and services. There's another dynamics that work on in the firm is the bargaining power. So there always this bargaining power among the employees, managers, and owners that affects mutual gains created in the firm, how they are distributed. So think about the profit sharing. So if firm earns a lot of profit, a owner might say, oh, I don't want to distribute it to the workers or managers. But workers might say, hey, I produce that value. Why don't you give me a part of that? And that's the age-old struggle between the capitalists and the workers in a capitalist system of production. And that was the basis of the whole ideological divide behind communism or socialism versus capitalism. So there is no hard and fast rules under capitalism that anything that produced or any profit that's earned needs to be shared. There are firms who share their profit with the workers, but there are firms who don't. And the third player in this is the managers. Managers or CEOs have their own interest, and often they try to leverage their own position in the whole production process. It is very important to understand that CEO of a company is separate from the owner of the company. CEO may be a big stockholder in a company, but not necessarily that means that that person is the sole owner of a company. So let's try to differentiate between firms and the market. And if you recall, firms where they employ raw materials and workers to produce a good and they sell it in the market. So market is a place or which can be a virtual place where the exchange of goods do take place. So let's try to differentiate between a firm and the market. A firm represents a concentration of economic power in the hands of the owners and managers. So in a firm, there's the owners and the managers, they have the right to direct what needs to be done in a firm. However, in a market, it's a decentralization of power because nobody can force you to buy anything, nobody can force you to sell anything. Second, firms have a decision-making process and ways of imposing their decisions on the people in it. We all know there are rules and regulations in a firm. When you go to a job, they have their own rules and you have to follow it. However, there are no rules and regulations in a market. The only motivating factor in the market is the price. And price is that motivate and constrain people's actions in a market, where decisions are made by hundreds and millions of people altogether. For example, when you try to buy, say, potatoes, you go to a store, you see the potato price, you just buy it. You really don't have a lot of choice about the following the policies of buying potatoes, right? It's pretty simple. You go, pay the money and get the potatoes, which is not true about a firm. Third, social interactions in firms sometimes extend over decades or even a lifetime. Think about your co-workers. If you have ever worked, you perhaps develop some kind of social relationship, which is pretty much missing in the market. You may have a good relationship between the coffee seller or coffee shop owner in your neighborhood, but think about buying stuffs in Amazon or think about buying stuff in a grocery store. How many times have you tried to develop a relationship with somebody in an online market or in a grocery store? In a firm, there are firm-specific assets. That means working in a firm means accumulating firm-specific knowledge, which helps to serve the firm better. However, there's nothing called market-specific knowledge. In a market, there's no specific knowledge. Only thing you have is the price, and the price is the reflection of whether you want to buy the product or not. Working in a firm means engaging in a relationship in which some individuals who have the power to issue orders to others with the expectation that those orders will be carried out. So whenever you work in a firm, there are rules and those rules need to be followed. Your manager comes and say, hey, you better show up at work at 8 a.m. because that's the rule of the company. You are expected to follow it. However, there are no as such rules in the market. Buyers and sellers are free agents and no one has a power or issue order to the other person. So for example, a buyer cannot force you to some seller to sell you the product, or as a seller you cannot force somebody to buy your product. It all depends on what price each of you are willing to charge. So price is the only factor, most important factor that drives the market interactions.